The day began like any other for the human. His name was Jack, and he was just another off-world worker in the alien city of Varric. The streets were loud with merchants shouting, engines roaring, and strange alien music playing from stalls. The smell of roasted street food mixed with the sharp, metallic scent of the city's air. Jack kept his head down as he walked, because in Varric, strangers who stared too long often got into trouble. But then, everything changed. At first, he didn't notice her. She was small, hidden among the crowd. Only 4 feet tall, she moved quietly, but there was something about the way people reacted to her that caught Jack's attention. Massive alien guards, covered in armor and weapons, stepped out of her way without a word. Merchants stopped shouting as she passed, and even a gang of street thieves froze like statues. Their eyes followed her, but none dared speak. Jack thought she was just a child at first. Her clothes were simple, worn and dusty from travel, but when she looked up, her eyes didn't belong to a child. They were sharp, cold, and full of something far older than her small frame suggested. It felt like she could see straight through him before he could turn away. She walked directly toward him. The crowd seemed to open for her, leaving Jack standing alone in the middle of the street. Her steps were slow, steady, like she was taking her time to make sure he knew she was coming. When she stopped in front of him, she didn't say hello. She didn't ask his name. Instead, she spoke in a calm, quiet voice. "You work for me now," she said. Jack blinked, thinking he had misheard her. Around them, the street was completely silent. People were watching, and their faces told him this was no joke. A tall, scaled alien standing nearby even took a step back, looking afraid. "I think you've got the wrong guy," Jack replied, trying to keep his tone casual, but she tilted her head slightly, and the way she looked at him made him feel like his words didn't matter. "You work for me now," she repeated, not louder, not softer, just the same, like it was already a fact. Jack could have laughed, but something deep in his gut told him this was serious. He glanced at the people around, hoping someone would step in. But they all avoided his eyes. No one wanted to be involved. It was as if they already knew what happened to those who refused her. "Who are you?" he asked. Her answer was a small, almost invisible smile. "Follow me, and you'll find out." Before Jack could argue, she turned and began walking away. Her pace was slow, but the crowd moved aside for her again. Every instinct in Jack's mind screamed at him to walk in the opposite direction, to forget this strange meeting, but his feet betrayed him. He found himself following her, weaving through the busy market, leaving behind the comfort of the main streets. They went deeper into the city, through narrow alleys where the air felt heavy. The walls were covered in glowing alien signs and strange markings. Jack could hear distant machinery humming below the ground. She never looked back to see if he was still there. She simply knew he would be, after several turns. They reached a hidden metal door. It opened with a hiss, and she stepped inside without hesitation. Jack followed, and the door shut behind him, sealing them away from the noise of the city. The room was dim, lit by only a few blue lamps. It wasn't large, but it was clean. A table sat in the center with maps, strange devices, and data pads scattered across it. Jack realized this wasn't some child's hideout. This was a command center. She walked to the table and tapped one of the maps. A hologram lit up, showing a layout of the city. Red markers blinked across certain districts. Her voice was calm as she spoke. "I control this city." Jack almost laughed again, but the way she said it made him believe her. He had seen gang bosses, smugglers, and corrupt officials, but none of them had the quiet confidence she carried. She didn't brag, she didn't threaten. She simply stated facts. "You'll do what I tell you," she continued. "You'll protect me when I say so. You'll go where I send you. You'll keep your mouth shut." Jack frowned. "And if I say no?" She looked up at him, and for the first time, saw a flicker of something behind her calm eyes. Not anger, but something far colder. "You won't," she said. For a moment, Jack thought about walking out, but his curiosity was stronger. Then his fear. Who was this tiny alien girl, and why did she think she could command him? More importantly, why did the entire city seem to agree with her? He didn't know it yet, but by following her, he had just stepped into a game far bigger than he could imagine. And in that game, she was always the one in control. Jack stood in the dim room, his eyes shifting between the tiny alien girl and the glowing maps spread across the table. The air felt heavy, like this place was far away from the city outside. She moved slowly around the table, her small hands touching data pads, rearranging strange devices with care. Every movement was calm, but there was no doubt she was in charge. "Sit," she said, without looking at him. Jack hesitated, then pulled out a metal chair and sat. The seat was cold, and the sound of it scraping against the floor seemed too loud in the quiet room. She finally looked up, and her gaze was steady, sharp, like she was weighing every part of him. "You work for me now," she said again. "That means you follow my rules." Jack leaned back, folding his arms. "I don't even know your name. You don't need it," she replied without hesitation. "Names are for people who need introductions. I don't." There was no arrogance in her tone, just certainty. She spoke like someone who never needed to explain herself. Jack sighed. "All right, what are these rules?" She tapped on the map, zooming in on a district marked in red. "Rule 1. If I tell you to go somewhere, you go. No questions, no delays." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And if I don't feel like it?" Her eyes locked onto his, cold and unblinking. "Then you'll regret it." The way she said it wasn't a threat, it was a promise. "Rule 2. You protect me." She continued. "You see danger, you stand in the way. You hear trouble, you handle it before it reaches me." Jack gave a small laugh. "You think someone's going to attack you. Half the city seems terrified of you." "They should be," she said softly. "But fear is not protection." Her words sank into him, and Jack realized she might have more enemies than friends. "Rule 3. You don't speak about me to anyone," she said. "Not your friends, not strangers, not even in your dreams. If someone asks about me, you forget I exist." Jack frowned. "Why so secretive?" She tilted her head. "Because secrets keep me alive." The silence in the room grew heavier. Jack glanced at the maps again. Noticing some of the red markers had numbers next to them, he guessed they were targets, safe houses, or maybe even enemy locations. Whoever she was, she had an entire network in this city. "And Rule 4, she added, her voice dropping lower. "You obey, always, even if you don't understand. Even if it doesn't make sense, you trust that I know." "More than you." Jack stared at her, trying to read her expression. She didn't look like a criminal boss. She didn't look like a soldier. She looked like something else. "That's a lot of trust you're asking for," he said. "It's not trust." She replied, "It's survival." Her words made him uneasy. He thought about walking away, but then he remembered the faces of the people in the street earlier, the way even dangerous-looking aliens had stepped aside for her. Whoever she was, she had power, and power always came with danger. "All right," Jack finally said. "I'll follow your rules." For now, she didn't thank him. She didn't smile. She just nodded, as if his answer had been obvious from the start. Then she turned away, pulling a small metal box from a shelf. She opened it, revealing a strange black device with glowing blue lines running through it. It was small enough to fit in her palm. "This is for you," she said, placing it on the table. Jack picked it up, feeling a faint hum inside the device. "What is it?" "A tracker," she replied, "so I always know where you are. Okay. And so you can find me if I call." Jack stared at it. "So I'm on a leash now." She gave him that small, unreadable smile again. "No, Jack. You're holding a lifeline. In this city, you'll need it more than you think." Her words carried weight, and Jack could tell she believed every one of them. He slipped the device into his pocket, wondering if he had just accepted something he couldn't escape from. Before he could ask more, she walked toward the door. "Come, I'll show you where you'll be staying." They left the command room and moved through another series of dim hallways. The air smelled faintly of metal and oil, somewhere far below. Jack could hear the hum of machinery. She led him to a small but clean room with a bed, a table, and a single window that looked out onto a narrow alley. "This is yours," she said. "Rest while you can. Tomorrow, you start working." Jack stepped inside, glancing back at her. "What kind of work?" She didn't answer. Instead, she gave him one last look before closing the door. The click of the lock echoed in the silence. Jack sat on the bed, his mind full of questions. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was already clear. The tiny alien girl might be 4 feet tall, but she was the one pulling all the strings. The next morning, Jack woke to the faint sound of footsteps outside his room. The small window showed a thin beam of pale sunlight breaking through the mist that hung over the city. He hadn't slept well. The bed was comfortable enough, but his mind had been full of thoughts about the strange girl who had claimed him like property. A knock came at the door, short and sharp, before Jack could answer. The door opened, and she stepped in, still wearing the same calm, unreadable expression. "Get up," she said. "We're going out." Jack rubbed his eyes. "Where?" She ignored the question, tossing a small bag at him. "Carry this." He caught it, feeling the surprising weight inside. "What's in it?" "Something important," she replied, "and dangerous if handled wrong. So don't drop it." That was all she said before turning and walking away. Jack had no choice but to follow. They moved through the quiet hallways until they reached the metal door he had entered through the night before. Outside, the city was already awake. The streets buzzed with noise and movement, Leon voices blending with the rumble of passing cargo haulers. She led him deeper into the lower districts, where the buildings were older and the lights flickered. The air was heavier here, carrying the smell of fuel and rust. Jack noticed more gangs on the corners. Big aliens with armor plating and cybernetic limbs. Their eyes followed the girl, but just like before, none of them tried to stop her. Some even stepped aside, pretending to be busy with something else. Eventually, they reached a narrow alley with cracked walls and dripping pipes. 3 massive alien thugs stood in the middle. Blocking the way, they were at least twice Jack's height, their skin rough like stone and their arms covered in jagged scars. Jack stopped. "I'm guessing we're not going around them." "No," she said simply, then kept walking. The largest thug stepped forward, his deep voice echoing in the alley. "You shouldn't be here, little one." Jack felt his muscles tense. He shifted the bag on his shoulder, ready to react. He didn't know if she had a weapon, and he didn't like the odds, but she didn't slow down. She stopped just a few feet away from the thug, tilted her head slightly, spoke in a language Jack didn't understand. It was soft, almost gentle, but every word carried something sharp inside it. The thug's eyes widened. His face, which had been full of smug confidence, suddenly went pale. Without another word, he stepped back, muttering something to the others. The 2 remaining thugs exchanged uneasy looks, then moved out of the way. Jack blinked. "What did you just say to them?" She walked past without answering. "Come on," Jack followed, still glancing back at the thugs, who now avoided looking in their direction. He had seen fear before, but this was different. It was as if her words had reached into their minds and pulled something out, something they didn't want to remember. After another few turns, they entered an abandoned building inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of dust. She led him up a flight of stairs to a room where an old alien sat at a table. The alien's eyes were clouded with age, but he smiled when he saw her. "You brought it?" the old one asked. She nodded, motioning for Jack to place the bag on the table. The old alien opened it carefully, revealing a strange cube made of black metal, glowing faintly with shifting blue symbols. "Perfect," the old one whispered. "This will change everything." Jack frowned. "What is it?" The girl glanced at him. "Your first job was to carry it here without losing it. You passed. That's it." Jack asked, "We could have been killed out there, and you call that a test?" Her expression didn't change. "If you had been careless, we wouldn't be standing here." Jack wanted to argue, but deep down, he understood. This wasn't about the weight of the object. It was about moving through dangerous ground without drawing the wrong kind of attention. The old alien handed the cube back to her. "Be careful, child. There are many who would kill for this." She nodded and turned to leave. Jack followed her back through the streets. The gangs they passed before were gone, as if they had melted into the shadows when they reached the safer part of the city. She finally spoke. "Now you know, Jack, in my world, danger doesn't announce itself. It waits in silence, and you either walk past it, or it swallows you whole." Jack studied her small frame, still amazed at how someone so tiny could make even the biggest aliens step aside. He didn't know if he wanted to be a part of her world, but something told him he already was, whether he liked it or not. That night, Jack sat alone in the small room she had given him. The narrow window showed the faint glow of the city lights. The hum of distant engines was like a constant heartbeat in the background. He had been thinking all day about what had happened in that alley, about the way 3 huge thugs had backed away from a girl barely half their size. It didn't make sense, and Jack hated not understanding. A quiet knock came at the door, but before he could answer, it opened and she stepped in. Her expression was the same as always, calm, unreadable, almost too controlled. She carried 2 small cups and set one on the table. The steam rising from it smelled faintly sweet. "Drink," she said simply. Jack took a sip, the warmth spreading through his chest. "So, you going to tell me what happened back there?" She sat across from him, folding her small hands together. "No," she said, without hesitation. Jack frowned. "Why not?" "Because knowing will change you," she replied. "And I'm not sure you're ready for that." He leaned back in his chair, frustration building. "I'm risking my neck following you around, carrying things you won't explain, dealing with people who look like they could crush me in one hit. And you can't even tell me who you are?" Her gaze didn't waver. "I can tell you what I am not. I am not your friend. I am not your enemy. I am not someone you can measure by what you've seen so far." Jack shook his head. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight," she said softly, but there was steel in her tone. They sat in silence for a while. The only sound was the faint hum from the small heater in the corner. Jack studied her, trying to find any clue in her face, but she gave nothing away. He noticed, though, that her hands were trembling slightly. She kept them folded tightly, but the small shakes were there. "You're scared," Jack said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "I am not. You are." Jack insisted. "Not all the time. Maybe, but right now." "Yeah, you're scared." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stood, walking over to the window. She looked out at the city, her voice quieter now. "Fear isn't weakness, Jack. It's the reminder that you're still alive." Jack waited, hoping she'd say more, but she didn't. He knew there was something behind her words, something she wasn't ready to share. Finally, he asked, "Who are you hiding from?" She glanced over her shoulder at him, and there was the faintest trace of sadness in her eyes. "Someone who won't stop until I'm gone." "Then why stay here?" He asked. "Why not run?" She turned back to the window. "Because running makes you pray, and I'm not prey." Her voice carried a quiet fire, the kind that didn't need shouting to be heard. Jack realized that whatever past she had, it had carved her into someone both fragile and unbreakable. After a moment, she stepped away from the window. "It's late. You should sleep." But as she moved to leave, Jack spoke again. "You know, one day you're going to have to tell me the truth." She paused at the door, her back still to him. "And when that day comes, you'll wish you didn't know." Then she was gone, leaving Jack in the dim room with a cooling cup of sweet-smelling drink. He sat there for a long time, staring at the door. The more she refused to speak, the more he wanted to know. He didn't just want answers, he needed them. But deep down, he wondered if she was right. Maybe the truth would change him, and maybe not for the better. Jack woke the next morning to the sound of the city roaring outside, but the air inside the room felt heavier than usual. There was a stillness, a tension he couldn't explain. It was the kind of silence that made you think something was waiting. Just out of sight, he sat up, rubbing his face, and noticed the small device she had given him, the tracker blinking faintly on the table. Before he could wonder why, the door swung open and she stepped in. Her face was the same calm mask as always, but her eyes were sharper today. "Get dressed," she said. "We have a problem." Jack pulled on his jacket. "What kind of problem?" She didn't answer immediately. She turned, motioning for him to follow. They moved quickly through the hallways until they reached the main room with the glowing maps. Several new red markers had appeared on the display. "They're here," she said quietly. "Looking for me." Jack stepped closer. "Who's they?" Her gaze stayed on the map. "A bounty hunter. Not just any bounty hunter. One of the best in this part of the galaxy. He doesn't take jobs for money. He takes them for pride." Jack frowned. "And he's after you." She finally looked at him. "Yes, and he's not the kind you can bribe or scare away." Jack glanced at the blinking red dots. "How does he know where to find you?" She didn't answer, which told Jack she might not even know herself. Or maybe she just didn't want to tell him. "We don't have much time," she said instead. "When he arrives, you stay behind me. You follow my lead, no matter what I say, no matter how it sounds, you don't interfere." Jack crossed his arms. "Why? You think I can't handle myself?" Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "This isn't about handling yourself. It's about surviving something you don't understand." The room felt smaller with those words. Jack knew she wasn't exaggerating. The way she spoke made it clear this bounty hunter wasn't just dangerous. He was something else entirely. Hours passed, but the tension never eased. Jack could feel it in the air like static before a storm. She didn't sit still for long, moving from one side of the room to the other, checking devices, adjusting maps, speaking quietly into a small communicator. She never raised her voice, but everything she did was precise, controlled, as if each move was part of a bigger plan. Finally, a faint rumble echoed from outside. It wasn't thunder. It was the low growl of an engine. Jack moved to the window and saw it, a black ship gliding silently through the air, its sleek frame catching the dim light of the city. It wasn't large, but it radiated danger. "That's him," she said from behind him, her voice almost a whisper. Jack turned. "You've dealt with him before." She shook her head. "No, but I've heard the stories. Ships destroyed without a shot fired, targets taken without a sound. No one knows what he does with them after." Jack's grip tightened on the edge of the table. "And what's your plan?" She looked at him with that same calm face. "My plan is simple. I'll talk to him." Jack stared. "Talk? That's your plan?" "Yes," she said. "Because if I fight, people will die, and I'd rather keep the body count low." A shadow fell over the building as the black ship hovered above. The hum of its engines filled the air, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. A figure stepped into the alley outside, tall and broad, wearing armor that looked older than the city itself. His helmet hid his face, but his movements were slow and deliberate, like someone who had never once been in a hurry. Jack's instincts told him to run. But her voice stopped him. Stay. She stepped outside, her small frame almost swallowed. By the shadows, the bounty hunter stood still for a moment, then tilted his head slightly, studying her. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't make a sound. Then she spoke, her voice steady, calm. You will leave. The bounty hunter didn't move. Jack could feel the tension in the air tighten. Then, slowly, the hunter took one step forward. His presence was like a wall, heavy and unshakable. She didn't back away. Her eyes never left his. She spoke again, softer this time. In a language Jack didn't know, the sound of it was strange, smooth, almost like a whisper wrapped in steel. The hunter froze, his head tilted again, and for the first time, Jack thought he saw a slight tremor in the man's armor. She took another step forward, still speaking in that strange language, and then the hunter dropped to one knee, his head bowed, his hands unclenched. The silence around them was absolute. Jack's jaw tightened. He had no idea what he had just witnessed. But he knew one thing. Whatever power she had, it could break even. The strongest, without another word, the hunter stood, turned, and walked back to his ship. The engines roared again, and the dark vessel rose into the sky until it disappeared into the clouds. She turned back to Jack, her expression unchanged. That is why you follow my rules, she said. Then she walked past him, heading back inside, leaving Jack standing in the alley with more questions than ever. Jack didn't move for a long moment after the black ship vanished into the misty sky. The echo of its engines still vibrated in the air. But his mind was locked on the image of the bounty hunter, one of the deadliest beings in the galaxy, kneeling to someone who barely reached his chest. He wasn't sure what he had just seen, but he knew it wasn't something normal. When he finally stepped back inside, she was already at the table, calmly pouring herself a drink. The maps on the wall still glowed, the red markers blinking slowly. You didn't even touch him, Jack said, his voice low. You didn't raise a weapon, you didn't make a threat, and yet he walked away. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Sometimes power isn't about force. It's about making someone believe you could destroy them without trying. Jack shook his head. No, that was more than belief. I saw his hands shaking. I saw him freeze like he was a child again. She sipped her drink. That's because I reminded him of something he'd rather forget. Jack frowned. What could you possibly remind a man like that of? Her eyes flickered with something strange. Not pride, but something darker, fear. The room felt colder after that word. Jack sat down, leaning forward on the table. You can control people, can't you? Not just with words, but with something else. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the map, as if the conversation was only background noise. Then she spoke softly. I can reach into the places people hide from themselves, the parts of the mind where they bury their worst memories, and I can make them feel it all again. Jack stared at her. That's dangerous. Yes, she said without hesitation, and that is why people obey me. He leaned back, the truth settling uncomfortably in his mind. This wasn't just leadership. This wasn't even intimidation. It was something deeper, something that touched the mind in ways no weapon could. Does it work on everyone? He asked quietly. Her eyes moved to his. Not on you? Jack froze. Why not? That, she said, is why I chose you. The words sank into him slowly. Jack didn't know whether to feel relieved or more worried if she couldn't control him. It meant she couldn't force him to obey, but it also meant she might need him for something no one else could do, before he could ask more. A loud chime rang from one of the wall panels. She moved quickly, pressing a button. The map shifted to show a flashing red signal in one of the outer districts. "They're testing us," she said, standing. "Come on." Jack followed her through the twisting streets until they reached a part of the city he hadn't seen before, the buildings. Here were old and crumbling, neon lights flickering weakly in the damp air. A group of armed aliens stood in a circle. Blocking someone in the middle, Jack couldn't see who it was, but the tension in the air told him it wasn't a friendly meeting. She walked straight toward them, Jack close behind. The group noticed her immediately, and the circle broke slightly, revealing a young alien boy, barely a teenager. His face was bruised, and his hands were tied. "Let him go," she said, her voice calm. One of the bigger aliens laughed. "Or what? You going to scare us like you did the hunter?" Jack tensed, ready to step in, but she raised one hand slightly, stopping him. She stepped closer to the alien who had spoken, tilting her head just enough to meet his gaze. "Look at me," she said softly. The alien smirked, but only for a second. Then his eyes widened, his breathing quickened. His body stiffened as if invisible chains were wrapping around him. Jack watched as the smugness drained from his face. Replaced by pure, raw terror, the alien's hands began to shake. His knees buckling under him, she leaned in just slightly, whispering something Jack couldn't hear. The alien gasped. Stumbling backward, he dropped his weapon and pushed past his own crew, running down the street without looking back. The others didn't wait. They scattered, dragging their weapons with them. Leaving the boy trembling in the center, she walked to him. Cutting his bindings with a small blade, her tone softened. "Go home." The boy nodded quickly and ran, disappearing into the maze of streets. Jack stood frozen. "You didn't even touch him." She walked past him, heading back the way they came. "I didn't have to." Jack followed. The image of that big, fearless alien breaking apart in seconds burned into his mind. He realized now that her power wasn't just rare, it was something that could turn the strongest enemy into nothing without a single shot fired. And she carried it in silence, using it only when she had to. But he also knew something else. Whatever gave her that power came with a cost, and sooner or later, he was going to find out what it was. Night had fallen over Varric. The city's glow lit the streets in shades of blue and red. But Jack wasn't looking outside. He was in the command room again, staring at the glowing maps, waiting for her to speak. He knew the questions he had carried since the day they met could not stay unanswered forever. She entered quietly, her small steps making almost no sound. She didn't sit this time. She stood across from him, her hands resting lightly on the table. Her eyes were calm, but tonight there was no wall in her expression. It was as if she had decided something. "You've been following me for days," she began. "You've obeyed my orders without understanding them. You've seen what I can do, and you've stayed." Jack crossed his arms. "Because I want to know the truth," she nodded slowly. "Then you will." Her gaze moved to the map. As if the blinking lights were a reminder of her past, "I was born in a place you will never see, deep inside the territories controlled by a faction called the Kier Dominion. They were obsessed with creating living weapons, not machines, not soldiers, but people with abilities that could win wars without firing a single shot." Jack's jaw tightened. "You were one of them." She met his eyes. "The youngest. And the smallest." They thought size didn't matter, because what they built into me was more dangerous than any weapon they could forge. "I can touch the mind, break the walls people put up, make them see their worst fears until they can't stand. And if I wanted, I could make them destroy themselves." Jack swallowed, the weight of her words sinking in. "That's why everyone steps aside when you walk past. That's why they obey," she said quietly. "But I escaped them. I didn't want to be their weapon. I thought I could disappear. But the Dominion never forgets what they own. And now they've sent bounty hunters after you." Jack said, "Not just hunters," she replied. "They'll send armies if they have to, and when they find me, they will use me until there's nothing left of who I am." Jack studied her, seeing the flicker of fear she tried so hard to hide. Then why not run? Why stay in this city where they can find you? She took a slow breath, because running will only delay them. I need to gather allies, power, and information. This city is a nest of smugglers, crime bosses, and warlords. If I control them, I control the flow of resources, and I make myself harder to take. Jack shook his head. "So you're building your own empire?" Her lips curved in the faintest smile, something like that. "But I can't do it alone. I need someone who can stand beside me without falling under my power. Someone who can see me as I am, not as what I can make them feel. And that's me," Jack said quietly. "Yes," she said simply. "When I tried to touch your mind the first time we met, nothing happened. I can't make you afraid. I can't make you obey. That makes you rare and valuable." Jack leaned forward. "So what now? You keep building your network until they come for you?" Her gaze locked on his. "No, we go to them first." The words hit him like a shock. "That's suicide." "It's war," she said calmly. "The Dominion will not stop, so we make them stop. We find their leaders, we break them, and we send a message they will never forget." Jack stared at her, the silence between them heavy. He had come into her world by accident, but now she was offering him a place at the center of it. A place where he could be more than just another human in an alien city. "You know," he said slowly, "if I walk away now, I could go back to my old life." She nodded. "Yes, you could, and you would be safe. You could forget me, forget all of this, and I would let you go." Jack hesitated. The thought of leaving was tempting. But the truth was, he couldn't unsee what he had seen. He couldn't unknow her or pretend the galaxy wasn't as dangerous as she had shown him. "If I stay," he said, "I'm in this fight for real. No turning back." Her eyes softened. "If you stay, you'll be more than my ally. You'll be my shield, my sword, and the only person I trust." Jack took a slow breath, then nodded. "Then I stay." She didn't smile. But something in her gaze shifted, a quiet acknowledgement that meant more than words. She extended her small hand, and he took it. The warmth of her grip was steady, unshaking outside. The city's lights flickered in the mist. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was preparing to hunt her again. But now she wasn't alone, and neither was he.